So, when the first images of DC's new Supergirl hit the internet, the reaction was interesting. Along with all the excitement, a whole lot of fans felt this massive sense of déjà vu. Today, we're going to unpack exactly why so many people are looking at DC's new hero and seeing one of Marvel's most legendary guardians.
Yeah, pretty much everyone is asking the same big question. Is this a cool, fresh take on a classic character? Or is it a familiar formula just, repackaged? The parallels to Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy are so obvious, you really can't miss them. So let's get into it. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the big controversy itself. Then we'll examine the actual evidence, piece by piece. After that, we'll dig into the comics, compare the tragic origins of both heroes, and finally, we'll try to land on a verdict. Is this influence or straight-up imitation? Okay, let's dive right in. So what's all the fuss about? Well, to put it simply, the first look at the new Supergirl movie just feels eerily familiar. Fans immediately started saying that the whole style, the vibe, feels like it was lifted directly from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's almost like we stumbled into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 4 by accident.
But look, this isn't just some vague feeling or a vibe check gone wrong. Nope. Fans are coming with receipts. They're pointing to very specific, concrete pieces of evidence. So let's put on our detective hats and go through the visual clues that kicked off this whole debate.
First up, the big one, the jacket. I mean, come on, you just can't miss it. That signature red leather jacket that Star-Lord rocks? Well, take a look at Supergirl's. The cut, the color, it's basically a mirror image. The similarity is pretty striking.
And it doesn't stop with the wardrobe. Next up, the music. We all know Star-Lord's entire personality is literally tied to his Walkman and that awesome mix. Well, what do you know? Supergirl seems to be getting the exact same treatment. We're seeing her with those old-school headphones, and the marketing is just drenched in 80s tunes.
Okay, this one is pretty wild. It's not just the hero, it's her crew too. Supergirl has this ally named Krem. Now, if you've actually read the comics, you know what he's supposed to look like, but for the movie, he's gotten this total punk rock space pirate makeover that makes him look like he'd be right at home hanging out with Yondu's Ravagers.
So at this point, it kind of feels like an open and shut case, right? DC is just copying Marvel. But hold on a second. It's really not that simple. Because this is where things get really interesting. When you actually crack open the comic books, the story gets a whole lot more complicated.
Remember that jacket we were just talking about? Well, guess what? It's not some new invention to make her look like Star-Lord. Nope. It's pulled straight from the pages of the Woman of Tomorrow comic series, which is the exact story this movie is adapting. So on this point, the film is actually being super faithful to its source material.
The music, though, that is a completely different story. And this is where people start throwing around the term lazy writing. For Star-Lord, the whole 80s thing makes perfect sense, right? He was taken from Earth in 1988, but Supergirl's story is set around the year 2026. So why is she using 45-year-old Earth technology? It just doesn't have that logical, in-story justification that makes it work so well for Peter Quill.
Okay, let's peel back the layers here. Let's move beyond the costumes and the music and get to the real core of these characters, their origins. Both Star-Lord and Supergirl are absolutely defined by incredible tragedy, and comparing their backstories reveals some fascinating parallels and some seriously crucial differences.
And this timeline really puts their pain in perspective. Look, Star-Lord's loss is immense. Losing his mother and getting ripped away from his home in the same moment is just awful. But Supergirl's trauma is on another level entirely, a cosmic scale. She doesn't just lose her home, she loses her entire planet. Then she escapes, finds a new home, and loses that one too. She's not just a survivor, she's the survivor of a double genocide. That is heavy. But here's what's so fascinating. Despite the massive difference in their tragedies, their reactions are strikingly similar. They both hide their pain behind a persona. He's the cocky outlaw, she's just indifferent. They both use a distraction to escape. Music for him, and in the comics, alcohol for her. They both battle this crushing survivor's guilt, and they're both pretty reluctant to step up and be the hero at first.
So after weighing all of the evidence, what's the final takeaway? Where do we land here? Is this a blatant copy, a simple coincidence, or something else entirely?
First, a little bit of context that is absolutely crucial. The whole idea of Supergirl as a traumatized survivor from Krypton, that has been in DC Comics since 1959. 1959. That is almost 2 decades before Star-Lord even showed up, and over half a century before the Guardians of the Galaxy movie made this whole aesthetic famous. So yeah, let that sink in for a minute.
So when you really break it all down, you see it's a complicated mix. The jacket, that's a faithful adaptation from her own comic. The tragic backstory, that's been true to her character for decades. But the 80s music and the whole aesthetic of her crew, yeah, that feels very heavily influenced by a formula that Marvel already proved was a huge success. And that really brings us to the crucial point. Let's be realistic. While Supergirl is definitely not a direct copy, would this specific version of her exist if Guardians of the Galaxy hadn't been such a monumental success? Probably not. The massive success of that formula likely gave DC the confidence and the financial incentive to lean into this very specific rebel with a vintage taste vibe. Out of all the versions of Supergirl they could have chosen, they chose this one.
Ultimately, this whole debate points to a much, much bigger question. In an industry that's built on shared universes and billion-dollar formulas, is true originality even possible anymore? Or is that line between inspiration and imitation just getting permanently blurred? It really makes you wonder. Let us know what you think.